Please make sure you guys have TTAC on your calendar, but we will be requesting RSVPs maybe going for the next meeting. So this has been the last 2 months. We've not had a quorum, which has never happened at TTAC, but maybe we remind people to RSVP so that we know if we have a quorum or not. And if not, it might be calling people and asking them to be there would be the last option. But I will hope that people do respond RSVP. So.
And every organization has the opportunity to appoint delegates and/or alternates. So
yeah, and
so part of that is, as members of this committee, it's our responsibility if we can't be here to make sure we do have an alternate here.
Yes, that would be very much appreciated.
I think too that we could note, since we possibly have items going to the TPO without TTAC action, that this is a fairly significant situation, especially if it's never happened 2 times in a row before. Then maybe it wouldn't hurt for the TPO staff to just issue a letter to all of the administrations on the board, just to notify them that this happened 2 times in a row, that there might be items coming to them at the TPO that don't have TTAC action, just kind of as a heads up to give everybody a reminder that they have both staff and alternates, and to let staff know if they need any help making sure that their positions are fully staffed.
Madam Chair, I had one question. For a quorum for this particular meeting, we had 3 VDOT representatives, but do we just get 1 vote? How does that work for a quorum in this committee?
Oh, we're missing a quorum because we're down to
Okay, all
we have
right.
enough members and enough
Okay,
agencies, localities. Last month we moved the original 20.
okay.
Were there any additional questions or comments before we get to the agenda? Were there any introductions around the table? Since there's not a lot of people, I guess we'll just move on. Item number 3 will be moving past. Item number 4 is public comment period, limited to 3 minutes per individual, which may be present. Is there anyone here that would like to speak? Seeing none, item number 5 is submitted public comments. Those would be in the agenda package, and currently there aren't any that were submitted for this month. Item number 6 is comments and updates from our state and federal agencies and military liaisons. We'll go ahead and start with VDOT.
Okay, just a quick reminder, tomorrow, November the 2nd, between 6 and 7, there will be a town hall trails meeting. Some of you may have already gotten an invite for that. I just wanted to give you a quick update on smart scale policy change updates. You know, we had a presentation by Brooke Jackson. We're still vetting the policy changes. We expect those changes to be acted upon in December. So once we find out that information, we'll share that with you as well. And some of you may have gotten an invite yesterday to a smart scale town hall meeting. So if you can, go back and take a look at that information. That's all for me.
Thank you. DRPT, do I see them at the table today? Okay. Federal Highways, also not at the table today. The Port?
Good morning. I would just like to say thank you to the HRTPO folks who participated in Port Port yesterday. Chris Gullickson on our team is here. I really enjoyed those folks who were able to join and participate. And just want to remind all of our partners around the table that if you and the teams are interested in that part of our facility, we'd love to schedule time to invite your communities. You represented your communities and schedule tours with firsthand what's happening in your region. Thank you.
Thank you. And our military partners are not joining us today. So Next would normally be approval of our consent items. There are some amendments, so as we discussed earlier, we won't be taking action on that, but if you're reviewing the amendments that were made, please note that the amendments are specific to a minor change in the language, the conformity language. That's specific to the policy amendments that we made earlier in the year to simplify that process. So if you have any questions, you can certainly get with Pavithra or Kathleen to see what that was. But that's what that amendment package is. Item number 8 would have been the roadway performance final report. So just note that you can certainly review that through the links that are in the staff report. And number 9 is the carbon reduction program statewide strategy. This will be a presentation from Erin with VDOT.
So before Erin gets started, she is going to brief us remotely. As I said, technical challenges. So if you have any questions, we will be typing it in the chat so she can respond. She's able to, we can hear her, she's not able to hear us. So just let us know of any questions and we'll type that in the chat if you do have any questions.
All right, good morning, everyone. Can I get a couple of head nods to make sure folks can hear me? Perfect. So thank you for allowing me to join virtually today. I apologize that I can't be with you in person, but I did want to present today on the VDOT carbon reduction strategy. For those of you that have not met me before, my name is Erin Belt. I'm the decarbonization lead for VDOT in our environmental office. I'm actually located in our Office of Transportation Sustainability in VDOT Central Office in Richmond. Next slide. So just to jump into it, I wanted to cover some of the roles and responsibilities of this program. And again, for those of you that have seen this presentation, I know that Pavithra has seen this recently. I apologize for the redundancy, but I appreciate, again, the time to present to you today. So from the Office of Transportation Sustainability, we have been tasked by Federal Highways to draft the carbon reduction strategy as the overall strategy document for the carbon reduction program. And as requested, we are willing to consult with NPOs and our partners at VDOT on eligibility for projects that qualify for CRP dollars. So in terms of our district planning staff, and for you guys, we have a wonderful resource in Todd Halsey. As an NPO, you'll be coordinating with him directly on project selection and any processes that you might want to develop at the NPO level to work through those selected projects to receive dollars. From VDOT's perspective, in terms of dollars and cents, our infrastructure and investment division holds our purse strings across the agency, but also for NPOs. They receive that funding directly from Federal Highways, and then they disperse those dollars based on the funding formula allocation, and then also assist in the selection of those projects that VDOT can select statewide that are not related to the NPO dollars that are being obligated and allocated. So from the NPO perspective, we have reached out over the last 6 months for input on drafting the CRS. And then for large NPOs like HRTPO, coordinating on project selection, you will have that responsibility as you're defining your CRP program for your NPO. And then from Federal Highways perspective, the planning and the environment division, they are issuing both CRP program approval, and they'll be reviewing our carbon reduction strategy, as well as verifying that the document that we put together is consistent and compliant with the program overall. And we expect to have their approval sometime in the spring. Next slide. So in terms of development, I apologize that this slide is pretty busy, but wanted to cover what it has looked like from the earnest, intense start of outreach with NPOs in August with a survey. Part of that survey was to ask for feedback on your processes and policies and strategies at the NPO level, and then also gauge interest in a work group listening session, as well as one-on-one meetings that were held into September and October. So right now, we have finished drafting our document. We will continue to make updates as our leadership reviews and gives us feedback on this. The document is due on November 15th, so we've got about 2 weeks from today to get that document in its final form to federal highways. Next slide. So in terms of the document outline, we're covering the background of the program, as well as program guidance, allocation, and supporting initiatives. Existing conditions across the state, because we recognize that the geography of Virginia leaves NPOs at the advantage and sometimes disadvantage of where they are, and whether the carbon reduction program matters as much in a rural setting versus an urban setting. We have significant information on the coordination and outreach piece, and I'm going to cover some of those survey results in a few minutes to talk about the feedback that we've received both from public stakeholders as well as our NPOs. We have our strategy, identification, and analysis section. I know that HRTPO is very familiar with the CMAQ toolkit. We don't have all of our NPOs familiar with them, but again, if they're smaller, they're not large NPOs receiving part of that 65% of the formula funding, VDOT is going to be running those analyses for those NPOs. Then we have implementation, what that looks like in terms of the strategies that have been incorporated. And to be clear, VDOT is not taking a restrictive approach to this document. We are including all of these strategies that are called out in the program guidance. And as we update this document through time, we'll be able to include those innovative strategies that NPOs and or VDOT have developed with the demonstration of carbon reduction. And as part of the conclusion to summarize the document, we're including our current list of funded activities where VDOT has obligated funding for projects statewide, as well as notes on what makes you shine as an NPO. So some of the feedback that we've received, the highlights that we've pulled from your documents that you've shared with us, so that this document serves as a resource and as well a little bit of a clearinghouse. In addition to those two appendices, we are including resources for additional funding opportunities. So we've heard from our smaller NPOs that when CMAQ dollars are not available directly, when the carbon reduction dollars are not available directly, that they're really at the mercy of VDOT on whether funding is allocated to projects in their areas. And so what we've been asked to do is put together a resource of all of the additional funding opportunities that we're aware of, either currently or upcoming, that NPOs have the ability to apply for as an eligible entity. So we hope that that's a resource across NPOs in the state. Next slide. So in terms of our NPO consultation, our very first true outreach occurred in April of May of this year with the round robin statewide 6-year improvement program meetings, where we asked for stakeholder and NPO feedback on some early survey questions. If as an NPO you took that survey earlier this spring, this year, you likely saw similar questions as part of the NPO survey that was targeted only to NPOs in August. We had a work group and information meeting in September. Some of those questions were again asked again, because as we're sending out the surveys, this is also an education opportunity. So where someone may not have been familiar in April and May with the CRP program, they may have become familiar with the program by September. And so those questions not only gave feedback to VDOT on familiarity with carbon reduction, but it also allowed the participants of that meeting to see the responses of their cohorts in live time. Following that meeting, we had multiple one-on-one meetings in September and October with NPOs that requested those meetings across the state. And then just last week, presented this very same presentation, a little bit altered, to the Danville peer-to-peer exchange meeting with executive leadership. Had some good feedback, lots of questions about the intersection between NEVI and CRP. So it was really good to see folks asking those questions and being engaged. Next slide. So the 6-year improvement program public results survey, while the participant level was low, not a lot of people participated either directly in those one-on-one meetings, in those public meetings across the state, and or scan the QR code to take the survey. What we did get out of this was that the carbon reduction strategies that were important to the folks that responded included bike lanes, sidewalks and crosswalks, bus rapid transit, and zero emission vehicle infrastructure. Those were the top ones that we saw, and that plays into some of the later survey results that we have. Next slide. So in terms of NPO survey results, we asked about the importance of carbon emissions to your organization, your familiarity with the program overall, and then if the NPO has specific climate plans, projects, policies focused on transportation emission reduction. While some of our larger NPOs do specifically have that called out as part of their long-range transportation planning, some of our smaller NPOs don't necessarily call out climate reduction or climate emission reduction goals or even carbon reduction goals, but they do have long-range planning for bike paths or greenways. And those are examples of where carbon reduction strategies play into an NPO, even if they're not called out directly as such. Next slide. So we asked NPOs during that meeting, what is important to you and to your stakeholders? So like I mentioned earlier from the 6-year improvement program results, bike and pedestrian support, public transportation, and electric vehicle charging. So it was really exciting to see that that early April-May survey and the feedback that we received directly from NPOs really mirrored each other because the number of participants in that early survey were much more public and stakeholder oriented and not NPO. Next slide. As part of our work group listening session, we also asked about the co-benefits of reduction strategies, and all of the participants in that meeting, and I believe we had 10 out of 15 NPOs take part in that work group session in September, indicated that co-benefits were factored into all of their strategy responses. So of note, we chose to highlight that safety, of course, is a co-benefit, economic development is a concern across the state, and a co-benefit of reduction strategies, health and quality of life, as well as accessibility. Really happy to see that those co-benefits were factored into strategy responses. Next slide. So in terms of challenges, because no new program comes without challenges, we recognize that existing land uses, funding availability, which we've heard multiple times, as well as politics comes into play when trying to implement either a new program, a new policy. These were direct feedback responses from NPOs on this carbon reduction strategy and program. So these were not examples that VDOT came up with. Some of the other pieces that we were interested to hear about would be relative effectiveness, misconception of the problem, and another word for carbon. And I think we heard also another word for like green or climate change. So using other words that are not instantly going to turn the folks that have to make those cultural changes against whatever the initiative is. We heard that from NPOs. Next slide. So some of the success stories that we wanted to highlight, we have significant bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure that we are very proud to highlight. Trails, regional greenway networks, sidewalks, and quality public spaces. We heard from John about the BARGE program in Hampton Roads, which we're really excited to learn more about. For those of us that are new to VDOT, microtransit, the wins that DRPT has had with some of the transit agencies that operate within NPOs, regional transit between work centers in different counties, and someone who is a long distance commuter, I'm very interested in that. And then an increase in rider transit use and free transit, which has been a huge benefit to some of our transit agencies, especially in downtown Richmond. Next slide. So for some of the tools and resources, I think most of you are very aware of these, at least the first two with the CMAQ emissions calculator toolkit, the suite of toolkits that are available depending on the topic and project of choice that you're looking to model. You have the USDOT Equitable Transit Community Explorer, or ETC. If you do not have granular data in the TPO area for disadvantaged communities, this is a great resource to use. If you have granular data available, you're welcome to use that. in addition to this tool as well. And then while we are putting in an appendix of resources for funding, the US DOT discretionary grant dashboard is a great resource for transportation specific grants, but keep in mind that other programs under Department of Energy and the Environmental Protection Agency release periodically that also address transportation. So for instance, if the school bus program that is an EPA program, it is not likely to be found in the discretionary grant dashboard because US DOT is managing this one. So just be aware that you might not be able to capture everything by using this dashboard. This is going to be transportation specific. Next slide. So in review, I wanted to talk a little bit about next steps. So I talked a little bit about the schedule and that our plan is currently being finalized with our leadership review and the feedback that we get from that. Again, the plan is due November 15th. Federal highways, as part of this program, and you can see this language in the CRP guidance, they've allowed for a 90-day review on their side. So that does not mean automatic approval by February of 2024. They may need 90 full days before they can even provide us feedback. So the earliest opportunity for plan approval is next February with that 90-day review. But the benefit to VDOT and to MPOs, and I know that we've stressed this many times, is that we do not have to have approval of this document to be able to spend the dollars that have already been allocated either to VDOT or to the MPOs. So the monies that you have, whatever process is defined at HRTPO to either evaluate projects and then allocate funding and obligate that funding is not dependent on the approval of this CRS document. Next slide. So again, wanted to thank you. Before taking any questions, wanted to point out that just like with the NEVI program, we have an email inbox. We've also created one for the carbon reduction program. And so if you have questions, you're welcome to email me directly, or if you email this inbox, it is covered by more than one person. So just in case I happen to be out, somebody else will be able to receive that email. And then if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take them. I think I have to stay off of the live feed so I can actually, so that you can hear me and don't get an echo from YouTube, so I apologize.
Thank you, Erin. I think that was a very good presentation. Did anyone have any questions?
There.
So just wanted you all to be aware of this because this plan is due to the feds by November 15th, as Erin said, and then I know the TPS has
So
a
I'm
work.
not seeing any questions in the chat. Jamie, if I'm talking over you, I apologize.
So the TPS working group is working on recommendations for the CRP. As we said, this plan has to be in place. That's a requirement, but our funding is something we can figure out our recommendations and how we want to select projects. So just for your awareness, that will be in front of you in January to make recommendations on the process and we'll go to the board. So quorum is even more essential in January. So just wanted to add that.
Were there any other questions or comments on this topic? Thank you, Erin, if you can hear me. Seeing none, item 10 is CMAQ and RSTP selection process. That's item. Is there a presentation that goes with that? Is that something that we need to take action on in January? Is there a timeline for that?
January, you need action. We can have the presentation.
Well, we can go ahead and save it for January since we'll have to take action then too. Okay, so we're skipping item 10 until January. However, that also has a deadline, so we'll need to keep that in mind as well. And item 11 is a presentation on the state of transportation draft.
Good morning, everybody. Today I'll give you a presentation on our annual update to the State of Transportation in Hampton Roads report. This is a report that we update on an annual basis as part of our performance management effort. So in this report, we look at all facets of the transportation system in our region, whether it's roadway, air, the port, active transportation, anything we can get data on. And we put in the report the existing conditions and also the historical trends. And then also we try to make some comparisons with other large metropolitan areas where we have that data available. This is something we prepare annually along with the roadway performance report, which you saw a couple months ago, and also the system performance report where we look at our federal performance measures. So with that, I'll go over a few slides here in terms of some highlights from this year's report, starting with air travel. I'm sure you've seen in the news that Norfolk International especially is seeing record numbers of passengers passing through there. So in 2022, we were almost caught up to the pre-pandemic conditions from 2019, although if you look at Norfolk International, they are setting records there, some of it at the expense of Newport News, Williamsburg, unfortunately, since a couple airlines have not resumed service there after the pandemic. But when we see the 2023 numbers, we think we'll see a record number that surpasses what we saw back in 2019. Speaking of records, the port set another record last year in terms of the amount of general cargo that was handled at the port. About 26 million tons of general cargo passed through the Port of Virginia terminals back in 2022, which is a slight increase over what they saw in 2021, which is, as you can see, well above what we were seeing pre-pandemic in terms of the amount of cargo passing through there. We are seeing some slight decreases in 2023, as are the other East Coast ports. But one other thing I did want to mention is when you look from the growth rate from 2020 to 2022, the Port of Virginia had the highest level of growth of any of the ports that we saw on the East Coast. No surprise when we're seeing record volumes at the port, we're also seeing record volumes of trucks in our region. So this is showing the number of trucks that are going in and out of our region at our regional gateways. On any given weekday, it's about 22,000 trucks that we see go in and out of our region. So that wasn't a slight increase from 2021, similar to what we saw at the port, but also well above anything that we saw from the pandemic in 2020 and the years before that. Another record we saw was in rail travel in our region. So if you look at the 3 Amtrak stations in Norfolk, Newport News, and Williamsburg, there were about 250,000 people that either boarded or departed the Amtrak trains at those 3 facilities. So 2022 did see a record. Based on this, you can see most of that is due to growth at Norfolk, and most of that is due to the 3rd train that started service from the Norfolk station in, I believe it was July of 2022. So we are continuing to see increases in volumes into 2023, so we think we'll see another record. But most of the growth is due to the additional service we're seeing in Norfolk. Unfortunately, one area where we're not seeing growth is public transportation usage. So this is representing the 3 agencies, ridership, HRT, WADA, and Suffolk Transit. And you saw we had been seeing a decrease previous to the pandemic, but then when you get to 2020, it was a tremendous drop we saw at that time. So there were about 8 million trips taken on public transportation in our region in 2022. This is less than half what we were seeing if you go back about a decade before. I do want to highlight, though, this is not a Hampton Roads issue. This is a national problem. If you look at DC or any of the other big transit agencies throughout the region, they're seeing the same thing that we're seeing in Hampton Roads. So it's definitely a national issue, not a regional issue. We also looked at roadway travel, and this is based on about 80 locations throughout the region where traffic counts are taken every second throughout the entire year. And surprising to me, at least, we had seen the recovery from 2020 into 2021, but we go into 2022 and it was completely flat from 2021. So based on this, it kind of looks like the new normal in terms of roadway travel is going to be lower than what we were seeing pre-pandemic. Based on this chart, it's about 5% lower that we're seeing in terms of roadway travel from pre-pandemic conditions in 2018, 2019. So moving into 2023, we think this is about where it'll level out here in terms of roadway travel in our region. We also looked at in terms of roadway travel in our region compared to the other comparable metropolitan areas. We consider that list to be 41 areas throughout the country with populations between 1 and 4 million people. And so if you look at the amount of vehicular travel per capita in our region, We are on the lower end. It's usually around 22, 23 vehicle miles per person per day in our region. You compare that to some other areas like the Nashvilles or Birmingham's, Charlottes of the world, they're up in the 40, 50 range. So we have about half as much travel in our region as some of those metropolitan areas you see toward the left. We also looked at congestion. This is based on information that TomTom puts out as part of their congestion reports. So they look at hours lost due to being stuck in congestion. In our region, they said in 2022, the average traveler had about 15 hours lost due to congestion. Compare that to other areas, it's on the lower end, a little bit below average. Some areas were up 25, 30 hours stuck in congestion. So somewhat good news here in terms of that. Based on their data, we are still slightly below the congestion levels we saw prior to the pandemic, but it's only about an hour or two per person. So our congestion levels are close to approaching the pre-pandemic conditions we saw in our region. When we look at areas in terms of where we rank particularly high, one of the areas is the number, or I should say percentage of commuters that drive alone to work on any given day. So in 2022, that number was about 76%, I think, in our region of people that travel alone to work. This ranked fourth highest in terms of the 41 metropolitan areas. When you look historically over the data, we're usually not quite that high. We're usually somewhere middle to upper third, roughly. But post-pandemic, it looks like we are a little bit higher on that list, which is interesting to see. Another area where we always rank high is the percentage of workers that work in a jurisdiction that's different than the one that they reside in. So in our region, right now, it's a little bit under 50% of the people work in a locality that's different than the one they reside in. Like I said, we're always top two, top three. This year, when you look at the census data, we were number one in terms of that measure. So to me, as I always say, that just means in terms of transportation, we definitely need to think more regionally in our region, just because so many people are traveling from one jurisdiction to the other, whether it's due to work or shopping or personal reasons or anything like that. Looking at roadway safety, I guess I'll call this slightly good news, such as it is. We did see a decrease in the number of crashes and the number of injuries sustained in crashes when we went to 2022. We did see a decrease in fatalities as well, but unfortunately, this is still way above historical trends that we've seen there. I think it's 162 people died in Hampton Roads and our roadways in 2022. So that is lower than the 179 we saw in 2021, but historically, we were generally around 120 to 130 fatalities a year. But as you can see, that's just increased year after year. And then 2022, like I said, was the second highest number on record with 162. Somewhat correlated to this, and I found this really interesting when I looked, especially at the 2022 numbers, which you don't see here, but in terms of safety belt usage. So on this chart, the dark purple, the way the state measures it, they measure the south side as one region, the peninsula as one region, and then obviously the Virginia number. So when you're looking at seatbelt usage in our region, the south side is pretty high, just below 90%. Peninsula, unfortunately, is much lower, about 76% roughly. And you can see the peninsula and the Virginia numbers going down, especially 2018, 2019. No data was collected in 2020 during the pandemic, but into 2021. What I found particularly interesting is the state numbers have been released for the year 2022, and that statewide number is down to about 75%. That's the lowest in the country. So Virginia actually has lower seatbelt usage in the Commonwealth than any other state in the country, anywhere in the Southeast, anywhere that you see. So it'll be interesting when the regional numbers come out for 2022 to see if Hampton Roads is reflected in that. But when you start talking about fatalities, that is one of the biggest factors, along with speeding, drunken driving. It's seatbelt usage. Another thing I found interesting is what we're seeing here with the number of people in crashes that are bicyclists or pedestrians and the number of fatalities. Real interesting to see here. We have seen a decrease in the number of pedestrians and bicyclists involved in crashes in our region, especially during the pandemic and in the years after that. However, the number of fatalities has gone way up. So when you look at 2022, 42 pedestrians, I should say 38 pedestrians and 4 bicyclists were killed in our region. But you compare that to the number of crashes going down, clearly the severity is going up on that. Number of reasons, as far as I can tell, speeding. Our speeding numbers are going way up in our region. So obviously the outcomes of that when you're talking about vulnerable users such as bicyclists and pedestrians going up. Also distracted driving seems to be going up in our region. So we think that's causing some of the problems with the severity of the fatalities. I'll wrap up here with a couple bits of good news. One of them is the condition of our bridges in our region. When you look at the number of bridges that are structurally deficient in our region, fortunately, it's gone down almost every year over the last decade. You look at 2023, and I think the number was 36, I believe, in our region. So 10 years ago, we were talking about 80 bridges in our region being structurally deficient. So this is definitely good news, seeing this number go down each year. And the last thing I want to mention, which is always good news when I present this one, I think, as part of the research, we look at air quality in terms of ozone and our ozone exceedances and the air quality here. And Hampton Roads seems to always rank best amongst the 41 metropolitan areas. So looking at the 2022 data, the same thing. We did have the best air quality in terms of any of the large metropolitan areas in our region. So with that, the draft version of this report was included with today's agenda. Since we don't have a TTAC meeting next month, we've got a longer public review period for this. So it'll be open for review and comment until a month from today, in December 1st. So if you have the time, please look over the document. Let me know if you have any comments or questions about the information in there. And then hopefully we'll be back here in January with a quorum to get approval of the document, and then it'll go to the TPO board in January. So with that, I'll open it up and see if anybody has any questions.
Keith, I'm interested on your truck numbers. Is that strictly kind of the periphery of the region? So we're measuring what's going in and out of the region?
Yes, it's actually the top 10 gateways to our region, and we do have continuous count stations at all of those locations, right where it is. So for example, Route 58 is just west of Cortland. Route 460 is at the Southampton Sussex line, I believe. So yeah, we're fortunate to have the perimeter, and then there's a bunch of them along the NC state line, both in Suffolk and Chesapeake. So yeah, that 22,000 number is right at the periphery of our region, trucks going in or going out of our region.
Do we also to collect any data that shows the interregional movement of trucks in and out of the port, like to warehousing facilities and back?
We do collect traffic, or let me rephrase it, truck counts based on VDOT's classification counts. Those generally are once every 3 years. Those 80 locations I mentioned with continuous counts, we do have truck volumes as part of that. And we look more in depth in those specifically in terms of our regional freight study, which is currently being updated. So as part of that, we look at all, I want to say it's like 400 locations in our region where we have truck counts. And so we look and see where those numbers are, what the trends are, what the percentages are, things like that.
It may also be interesting to include gate counts coming out of the ports themselves to see how many trucks are actually coming out of the gate. And then are they staying in the region, are they leaving the region, et cetera. But thank you for that.
And we do have that information. We have the information from the port, and it's broken down by mode. So we know the number of containers moving by truck, for example, and we can look at that as well, sure.
Were there any other questions or comments? Thank you, Keith.
Great, thank you.
Item 12 is the Transportation Alternatives Set Aside Guide Update Draft.
All right, thank you very much. So the HRTPO is updating our Transportation Alternatives, or TA, set aside program guide with updates that were recently approved by the CTB. A little background on the TA set aside program. The FAST Act replaced the Transportation Alternatives program with a set aside of the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program for funding transportation alternatives. And the bipartisan infrastructure law continued this. The next opportunity for submitting applications for the TA set aside program will be October 1st, 2025. Some eligible project categories for the program include on and off-road bike and pedestrian facilities, conversion of abandoned railroad corridors into trails, construction of turnouts, overlooks, and viewing areas, There's also environmental mitigation activities. This also includes safe routes to schools and boulevards and roadways, largely in the right-of-way of former divided highways. The CTB approved changes to the guidelines for the TA set-aside program in July of 2023. And the policy updates include the 4-year rule to reach construction, which was continued from the 2013 rule. Agreements must be signed and returned by the localities within 6 months of receipt. All TA funds available for CTB allocation will be distributed equally to each member. Applications are accepted biennially. Project selections are made in even number years. There's also 8 pre-applications and 5 full applications per applicant per cycle. Funded projects will receive 100% of the TA request up to the cap, and there is a $2.5 million lifetime cap on TA funds per project. And then the last one, a surplus funds transfer to a statewide account for redistribution according to a tiered transfer policy. Additional TA funds may be requested for a project via a transfer with a documented deficit at award, advertisement, during or after construction, and then to other project needs as well. And that statewide account will retain $2 million for project deficits. I have included this list of resources in case you would like further information on this. And the schedule for the TA set-aside program. In October of this year, the HRTPO board endorsed the proposed projects. Applications for this cycle were due on October 2nd of this year. From November to January, the evaluation and scoring of the project application will take place. January to February timeframe, the scores are presented to the CTB and to the HRTPO. In February, the TPS will meet for TA set-aside project selection. In March, this committee is scheduled to recommend a set of the TA set-aside projects and allocations for approval by the board. Later that month, the board is scheduled to approve the set of TA projects and applications for inclusion in the draft SYIP. And then in June of 2024, the CTB will award those projects. We'll skip that one. And if there are, so we are updating our draft guidebook with those updates, and it will be submitted for public comment, I believe until November 14th, and then we will take it to the board for approval. And I can answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Matthew. There's also a link in the agenda package, of course, if you want to review the guide in detail. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I've got one. Can you flip back a few slides to, or just keep flipping? I'll let you know when I see it. Just want to clarify one thing. I don't know if the for the right there. So the funded projects will receive 100% of TA request up to cap, and I know. So that's to say that we won't fund. That just phases won't be funded, because I know previously working through this and being part of the programming subcommittee, we might give you projects where, you know, we've got $400,000 left. We can't necessarily fund another project. We might be able to get through PE on one project to get it moving. We might be able to do PE in right away, and then that way when that project comes up again, it can just apply for construction or find construction from another format. My interpretation of this is that's something that won't be allowed. You'll either get all your money up front for a new project, and we wouldn't fund on a phase-by-phase approach.
So my understanding of it is that for an application, whether it's a phase or the whole project, whatever amount you're asking for the TA project, you'll receive 100% of that money.
Can VDOT clarify if it's an all or nothing option? Is the CTB's guidance that we cannot fund it by phase? It has to be 100% of the ask or none of it?
Madam Chair, I'm not familiar with that, so what I prefer to do is take it back to Todd and give you a definite answer. We can share that answer with you, Troy, in a couple days.
Thank you. I know there's the 4-year rule takes care, I mean, there's sort of that in a 4-year rule, but it's helped us a little bit. And I think, in terms of like, are we getting 100% of what we asked for? I think all of us would say we'd love to have the whole project funded, but gosh, if we could get PE kickstarted, maybe we get PE in right away, and then our city councils would be more apt to say, well, you've already got this money, we can then leverage that to provide construction money. So I think it's a benefit, but yeah, just keep me posted. That'd be great.
Were there any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Item 13 is the 3-month tentative schedule. If you take a look in your agenda, you'll see that the December meeting is typically canceled, so we won't be meeting next month. But please note that in January, there'll be a lot of stuff moved onto the agenda, so it won't necessarily be as drafted here. And there'll be a lot of things that are pretty critical at this point because we've been pushing them for a month or two. So that quorum will be very important. And then also in February. Item 14, for your information. One, I would note item E in there regarding that smart scale update that Eric gave earlier, and encourage everyone to take a look at that information that's coming out over the next couple months. And then also, Aviva had an update.
Yeah, a couple of quick things. One is the Title VI LEP plan. You've heard from Quan McLaurin, our Title VI Civil Rights DEI liaison. That was approved at our October board meeting. Since we didn't have a quorum, it had to go to the board. Just wanted, for your awareness, we have a link of the approved plan, so please take a look. And then I'm actually going to, on the smart scale, I know Eric talked about it. We had OIP present to us in October or September on the smart scale, but there's a very robust discussion on some additional changes that were being discussed at the October CTB meeting regarding the weighting of congestion versus accessibility. The reason we wanted you to be aware is this is still under, they're still discussing and looking at illustrative scenarios. So we have, VDOT has, OIP has said they'll be here at the November TPO board meeting to talk about smart scale. So please let your board members know. And I would, if you have the time, to please take a look at the October work session on smart scale. There's a proposed suggestion, or one of the proposals that came at this time during the October meeting was a shift in the weighting of congestion, reducing it and increasing accessibility. And that was a proposal that had a lot of discussion. And OIP has said they'll go back and look at some illustrative scenarios. I believe October 31st, the virtual town hall, but they are looking into a November meeting, but the plan was a December action by CTB. So just be aware, for your board members at November TPO board meeting, smart scale, there will be an item on the agenda. But I also wanted to call on Sam because of we had a good meeting on the military. I just want Sam to talk about it, just to talk about our engagement with the military partners here.
Sure, just wanted to let everybody know that on Monday, we participated in an interview with the US DOT Volpe Center and Federal Highway. They're doing an exercise called Military at the Table, where they're trying to develop a resource guidebook for other MPOs and other state DOTs on how to engage their military in their region. And so they were using Hampton Roads as a model to talk with us about our partnerships and our engagements in the history and that we've had in working with the military. They were particularly interested in, how we've gotten them to be involved with our technical committee, such as this committee, our subcommittees, the TPO board, how we're all active participants in the joint land use studies, a lot of the other studies that go on at our military facilities. So it was a very, very good meeting. We had representation. Barb was there with the port. We had Rick Dwyer with the Harumfa, Colonel Hung, Captain Dees, as well as our military planning liaisons. Michael King attended that as well. I want to say we have about 25 people that participated as a part of that. So it's very good news for our region to be showcased in that way. And so we're looking forward to what that document will have to say. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item number 15, under announcements. The first thing is the nominating committee would like 2 minutes of your time at the end of the meeting. Just over here in the corner, up by the screen. Did anyone else have any announcements before we close the meeting?
Yeah, we do have a HRTO meeting after this meeting today. We were a little quick today, so there'll be some time, but we started at 11:30 over in the 757 room.
Okay, any other announcements?
I just have a question on item number 10. Will that presentation be posted? Or are you gonna wait to post the presentation?
Which agenda item?
Item number 10, the CMAC RCP.
Yeah, all our presentations will be there, but we
Okay.
will be bringing it up in January again. So,
Okay.
yeah, this one, yeah, we will, for January, you will have the presentation.
Okay.
Right, so in January, we'll do the presentation and take action. Any other announcements, questions, comments? If not, meeting adjourned.